All right, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Teardown. My name is Jeff Gluck, and I'm along with my coworker, Jordan Bianchi. We are motorsports writers for The Athletic, and today we're here to talk about race number 2 of the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs, Kansas Speedway. I'm here in sort of like a lounge or something at Kansas Speedway. It's like attached to the media center. I've been coming here, I guess, since, 2007. Never knew this room existed. But I said, hey, you got any podcast areas? And they gave me the code to this room. It has a code on the door.
There's a code?
Yeah,
Like a secret room?
Yeah, there's like, you have to punch numbers in. And yeah, there's like a refrigerator in here and 2 big screen TVs. I don't even know why I've spent time in the media. So I for sure to come in.
I was gonna say you should be working in here from now on.
I know, like this is very nice. There's no windows because it's a secret room. I don't think you can have a secret room and have windows. Can you?
Well, yeah, maybe it'd be hard to. It'd be hard to.
Yeah, but anyway, so
it's
yeah,
nice
here I am.
that they are giving you the respect that you deserve. Finally.
Well, it's only because the other rooms had already been taken off by the real media outlets. So
no, it's all about you, man. It's all about you.
Well, here we are talking about Kansas, and we expected a wild race. We expected this would be the type of race that would get playoff contenders in trouble. I'm not sure it was quite as wild as maybe some predicted, or as we've seen in the past, but certainly it had an impact on several big name drivers, and ultimately it was won by Tyler Reddick, who I said would be out in the first round. So
I did too, though. So we both did. But it's fair though. But I said it again last week, and I'll say it again. It was a fair criticism about this team. They haven't had consistency. They have shot themselves in the foot many times. And I said going to the playoff, this was a team that had a really, really high ceiling where they could roll off of victories, and I could see them running for the championship at Phoenix, and I could see them going out in the first round because of 3 consecutive just miscues. Like there was no middle ground, it felt like, for what this team could do, and it was fair either way. So I don't think it was a bad pick. And I think if you asked them and they were genuine about it, they would tell you, like, hey, we didn't execute the way we did this year. I mean, Tyler said it himself today. And but when this team is on, though, what this does, though, is like Tyler is a great driver. He can win on just about any kind of track out there. And this team, especially on these mile-and-a-half racetracks, and especially at Kansas, builds such fast race cars. Like, you don't have to be exceptional. You don't have to try to like do anything outside of your norms and do any heavy lifting of like Tyler doesn't have to carry a 5th place car and try to make a winning race car. The pit crew doesn't have to like turn off lightning fast stops. Just you kind of play within yourself, right? And that's what this team, I felt like, did today.
Yeah, I mean, again, we weren't questioning the speed. It was, we didn't trust them. I didn't trust this team to make it through the rounds without making mistakes. I thought they were going to take themselves out of it, and they're doing what they need to do. They're executing, and like you said, they talked about it today. Tyler said, like, we don't need to do anything crazy in this first round. So I'm racing. I'd love to race at 105% every time, but I'm kind of backing it down, and we're all sort of like, hey, let's just take a collective step back here a second and just get through this round. He said they could ramp it up, but as I was kind of listening to him say that, hey, we'll ramp it up in the later rounds, I almost wanted to be like, are you sure? Because what they're doing right now.
Don't. Like, again, stay within yourself. Don't try to do too much. Just, again, like, and I think that's what this team does sometimes. And it happened to them at Michigan. Remember? It was Michigan here where they had a pit stop where they didn't need to rush, and they tried to rush and they left a tire loose. And that's the kind of things you don't need. Just do what you're doing. And this is a perfect example of when you guys do this, you're as good as anybody out there.
Yeah. And look, he was going to finish second today, ultimately. So the late restart there, the 4-tire call, it all opened up for him. It was kind of funny afterwards. The moderator, Matt Humphrey, who was from NASCAR, asking the questions to open the press conference, asked him, about the restart. And it sounded like Tyler just had like an out-of-body experience, like blanked. Like he said, like he doesn't remember any of it, and that he just remembers. Oh, all of a sudden he's like, oh, I'm leading. Like it's just like, he just did what he had to do. Instinct took over. Bob, of course, showed him the replay, but he said, he didn't remember. Like it's just did it.
Yeah.
Now it was helped by obviously a late caution for Chris Buescher, because once again, Denny Hamlin was going to win a race. Denny Hamlin had the best car. It looked like he was sailing on his way to victory. Late caution. They do, first of all, it was like, okay, do they do 4 tires or 2 tires? 4 tires won the race and got second place.
It was the right call.
For sure. Now, the teams that did 2 tires, it also worked out for them in some cases. Like
Sure.
Joey Logano was probably going to finish 15th. I think, he was going to finish 15th. He takes 2 tires, starts, on the second row. I think it was second row, and then he ends up finishing 5th. So he got an extra 10 points.
10 points. That's
Yep.
10 points. That's huge. That's the difference between advancing out of round 1 and being one of the 4 guys sent home. That's a huge call for that team.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he was going to be on the cut line. He was, for most of the race, he was running as the bubble driver on the cut line, and he launched himself up. I think he's clear by 12 points or something now.
12 points now, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you also look at Kyle Busch. I think he finished 7th or 8th, and he wasn't going to finish that high either. They took the 2 tires. It worked out for them. They got a few more spots. Daniel Suarez stayed out on Wales. Where did Suarez finish? I having my computer this set up, doing it at the track. I can't see all my usual stats, but it didn't seem like it totally worked out for Suarez. I don't really know where he was running before, but staying out in that situation.
16th for Daniel Suarez.
What was it?
16th.
Okay, well, I guess I don't know where he was before, but not bad. I guess
but
worth
for
a
that
try.
Team, they have got nothing to lose. Like, why not?
Yeah. And then Eric Jones, obviously, for him to finish 3rd. I mean, and he was solid all day. So yeah, I mean, you look at it. I do think, again, 4 tires is the right call. Larson was having a chance to get up there. Elliott was having a chance to get up there. But ultimately, it came down to the restart. Denny Hamlin explained afterwards that, you could hear him say it on his radio too. He told Chris Gabehart, watch them laying back. And then he was watching them laying back because Larson was behind him. And Denny felt like, the NASCAR's not enforcing these, which they really don't, laying back on a restart. They'll call a restart penalty for jumping the start or changing lanes before the start finish line. But I don't really think you ever hear him call a penalty for laying back on the restart.
And you're not going to call, and I'm not saying that this is the right or not, but I think calling a penalty in that situation
in overtime, no way. Yeah, they're not going to.
Now I will say this though, if you wanted to make an example out of somebody, making an example out of Kyle Larson in that situation would have been good because it doesn't really affect him going on the next round. But it just we have not seen that, so that would have been very abnormal.
That would have been very controversial, even if it was the right call, just because it's so out of the norm. But to protect that, Hamlin said he felt like he had to back up to Larson to sort of take away any chance that Larson was going to get a big run on him. And just, if those who don't understand what we're talking about, if you're laying back on the restart, so somebody's ahead of you, you kind of drag a little bit. And then as soon as they go green, you have a whole bunch of area you can shoot forward and make a pass on them going into turn 1, or at least try to get side by side instead of everybody restarting at the same time, going the same speed. You can kind of, I'm not saying
some momentum.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's an advantage. So Hamlin was trying to protect against that. But then once everybody went, he was behind, and Reddick, who was on the other side of him, jumped up into the gap.
Yeah.
And Reddick set sail while Hamlin was still trying to play catch up at that point, and he was done. So at that point, it was going to be like, okay, could Reddick pass these guys on older tires, which clearly he could.
And he quickly did too. Yeah. And he made that great move, kind of went high and then swooped down low and passed on the apron. And he cleared Logano and Jones so quickly. It was like he had enough of a buffer to hold Denny off. And Denny got by him fairly quickly, but not quickly enough, just enough where it held him up. And that's the difference of the race. That race goes one more lap. Maybe Denny's got a shot at him, but Tyler had one shot at it and he knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, by the time Hamlin cleared everybody and was coming back, coming out of turn 4, it was like he was almost there. It was like, oh, could he get there? But no, he was too far back. So that cost him too much time. And that's the race. Hamlin sees another win slip away despite being the dominant car. Yeah. But at the same time, so, there's two sides of it, right? if you're Denny, you're saying, okay, I'm trying to get to 60 career wins. I'm trying to win these big races. He wants to win. That's, he's not doing that. Like the last 2 weeks, he's lost these 2 opportunities to win. On the other hand, it's playoff time. And at playoff time, you want to be running really well. And his team is running really, really well. Like I'm feeling pretty good about my championship pick still at this moment. Because I'm like, okay, well, I mean, if there's going to be a favorite right now, you would probably have to say it's him. I don't,
I mean, him or Larson.
Larson.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're 1A, 1B at this point, but they have clearly, I feel like they've kind of separated themselves from everyone else. And, Truex, I think we're going to talk about his problems and everything, and Byron too. I just feel like they have separated themselves. The thing I keep going back to though, and you're right. I mean, you want to have speed, you want to be in the mix week after week, and you want to peak at the right time. But again, like those playoff bonus points you're leaving on the table, man, that can be the difference sometimes. And it's one of those things. You go back and you can look at this and go, oh, we there, here, where, and it starts adding up, and that can be a lot. And we'll see. But again, if you've got speed and you're executing like they are, maybe it won't even matter. Because I mean, if you just keep running like this and you keep knocking out top 5 finishes, and pit road too, by the way, no issues on pit road for these guys. Denny's not having any problems. He's not making any mistakes. Like,
well, he had a loose wheel last week, but
yeah, I mean a loose wheel. But you're right. But I mean, you're right. That's a good point.
But I get what you're saying though. I mean, even on his podcast, he said they had excellent pit stops.
Yeah,
that was just sort of a freak thing.
Yeah, it's just. But I mean, you compare that what everyone else is seemingly doing in the playoffs right now, and
right.
The issues largely like they're on it right now.
Yeah, like even Chastain's team today, they are awesome pit crew. Even they had a crew member over the wall too soon and had to serve a penalty at one point after he had already gotten back in traffic. That kind of messed his day up a little bit. But yeah, speaking of messing people's day up, I mean, geez, Martin Truex Jr., it was interesting because like Saturday he comes in the media center and he's talking a lot about how at Darlington he had felt something in practice, after hitting the wall, but he didn't speak up to his team because he just felt like, I don't know, like maybe it's not that big. Like, he couldn't really tell. He didn't say anything before the race. And he said even that Saturday night before Darlington, it was like, because basically they would have had to go in and change that, which would have been, or even look at it, would have been an unapproved adjustment. They would have been starting at the back at Darlington. And he was like, I don't know if I want to do that.
But they were already starting in the back though. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, he said he acknowledged that. He said we were already pretty much starting in the back anyway. So what would he was like, why didn't I say something? But yeah, he was like, basically I should have spoken up. I should have told my team that something didn't feel right at Darlington. And then they had some bent piece and, had to deal with that. And they looked way off. We just thought they were off or something. Right. But it was because they were running the whole night with a piece that wasn't working at Darlington. So, but, he comes in here and he's like, well, this is a great track for us and we'll be fine. Lap 3, pops a tire puncture. I mean, and just like that, last place finish, regular season points leader going into the first round elimination race is 7 points below the cut line. 2 sub 30th place finishes, right? Then was he 32nd at Darlington or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah, it wasn't that bad, I thought.
No? Oh, okay.
I'm looking, hang on.
I can't remember where he was.
No, I thought he was actually the best finishing Gibbs car.
Oh, you're right.
You're 18th. Right. He finished 18th. Yeah.
Okay. You're right. Sorry, my bad.
But I mean, again, it was a bad day for them. That was a race they should have walked away with a top 5 finish easily.
Yeah. So, just like that, I mean, the entire points cushion, the entire regular season bonus, all that is erased. And now he's got to go to Bristol and race his way back into the cutoff. Now, if he does, and he can somehow survive it and make the next round, he'll still be back in a great position in playoff points. All this will be forgotten, but he's in a tough position right now because Bristol is not a place where you can just feel like, oh yeah, no problem. I'll just go stay out of trouble and make up spots and let everybody else wreck. I mean, that's tough. So what do you think of the predicament that Truex finds himself in at this point?
This is how cruel this playoff can be. You can run well and you can be victimized by a punctured tire. And the next thing you're down. It goes back to last week where you had a great race car, you got in the wall in practice, and you didn't figure out the problem, didn't diagnose it for whatever reasons, and you that was your mulligan, and you threw that away. Wow, when you throw that mulligan away, guess what? You leave yourself open on a track that we have seen these kind of issues happen year in and year out at this place. And now you're going to Bristol. 7 points is not a lot. Like, you can make that up in one stage, and that's great. But it's also not a track where Martin is phenomenal, by the way. Do you know how many top 10s finishes he has at Bristol?
Wow,
4.
over his whole career? 4 over his entire career?
4, 32 career starts, 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s.
Wow.
It's
Yeah,
like,
that's not great.
He's ran better than he's finished. I will say that. There's been races there where things have happened, but that just shows you. And that's not a track where you want to be in that spot. But this is the cruelty of the playoffs. This is what happens, and now you've got to figure out how to climb out of it. And they're good enough to do it. And you would think that guys above them will have some kind of issue of some sort, and you'll be capitalized. But again, you don't really necessarily, unless you go out there and win that race, your fate is kind of out of your control to some degree.
So here's what if I was Truex's team, here's kind of how I would approach it. I would go in thinking, look, let's not try to do too much. Let's not try to win this race. We don't need to be crazy here, because what's going to happen is, like, when you look at the cut line, say from even 8th to 12th. So Ross Chastain right now plus 18. Chris Buescher, because of that late wreck today, is only plus 13. Christopher Bell plus 13, Logano plus 12, Harvick plus 7. So I'm minus 7, right? I'm going into Bristol, and I'd be like, look, not all those guys are going to have clean nights. They're just not. Something's going to happen to somebody. That's how these races go. And I would almost bank on that. So I would just think, okay, look, as long as I can run a solid race, stay out of trouble, finish maybe even top 15, one of those guys is going to hit the wall, cut a tire, get caught up in a wreck. Something's going to go wrong. I will be able to pass them just by running a clean race. I don't need to do too much.
Sure.
I would think. And you know what? If it happens that I run top 15 at Bristol and it's not good enough, and all those guys have smooth nights, which seems unlikely, but that's just how it is. Like, I think you have to look at it like the tire thing today. James Small tweeted a picture of it. It was a puncture, right? It wasn't like, oh, they got over aggressive on camber and setup and blah, blah. And they, ran themselves out of the race. Like, they ran over something. I mean, what can you do? This is what happens. Now, this is for everybody that doesn't like the playoff format, that is the downside of this format, right? Like, but it's also a 3-race round. They also instituted playoff points. That's why he has the playoff points in the first place. And let's be honest. Okay. I mean, just being totally fair here. If somebody goes and finishes, what did you say he was at Darlington? 18th, you said?
18th.
Okay. If you go 18th, 36th, and outside the top 15 at Bristol, whether you're the regular season champion or not, you don't really deserve to advance. Like, how can you make the case? Well, yeah, but I saw people on the platform formerly known as Twitter today saying, well, this is just not fair. Like, he should have gotten a bye into the second round.
No one. Who said this? Like, just people, just fans?
Yes, they was like, this is not fair. Like, if you're the regular season champion, there's no way that he should be in this position. It's not fair. He should have a bye. And I'm just like, nah, sorry. No. Like, you still got a race for it. You still, I'm sorry. Like, you have to go perform at some point. And he had a big points cushion. If you throw it all away, it really sucks, especially when it's not your fault. But
Darlington was their fault. That's the thing. Like, today sucked, but you don't stub your toe at Darlington. Then today you leave here like, okay, cool, whatever. And if you go and run and finish 18th at Bristol, that's on you as well. Like, you got to own that. And I agree with it. Like, you just have to look in the mirror and say, you know what? We screwed up at Darlington. We screwed up at Bristol. There is nothing we can do about it. It sucks, but that is the format. This is how it is. And it's not like they didn't get a bonus. They got bonus points for winning the regular season title, which, by the way, are going to come in damn handy because they're going to need those if they're going to make it out of this round. So I hate that argument.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if he didn't have those 15 bonus points, and then you're going into Bristol.
Yeah, you're in must-win mode.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate. I feel for them because I think as an observer, not having a dog in the fight, you want to see the best be able to go out and do their thing. And when somebody's season is negatively impacted by running something over, whatever it was on the track, that sucks. But that's also racing. That just things happen in racing. Like it's not always straight up and fair, and stuff you can't control. Speaking of which, Bubba Wallace tire issue. Now maybe that was more in their control. I don't know if that was something camber related. I never heard if that was a puncture or something.
I never heard that either. So
I never heard a follow up on that, but it might have been setup related. I don't know, because people were Ty Gibbs popped a tire in practice. Kyle Busch popped a tire in practice. Buescher obviously at the end there seemed to have a tire problem. So, but Bubba Wallace was probably going to have easily a top 5 run today, maybe top 3. Who knows? Maybe better. I mean, his teammate won the race, and he was ahead of his teammate. And he was doing everything right. He won this race last year. Next thing you know, he's now 19 points below the cut line going into Bristol. I don't think that's necessarily must-win territory, honestly. Because if you can go there and get, even a few stage points, gain a few stage points, get yourself within, say, within 15 points going into the last stage, and then again, just like Truex, you assume something's going to happen to somebody ahead of you. You race what you can do. I don't think 19's a must-win, but it's not good. It's not a good situation to be in at all. It's very unfortunate for them.
It is, and they did. And Bubba had a great weekend. That team had a great weekend. They qualified well. They're running well. He ran a really smart, patient race to start with. And coming off a Darlington race where he had a miscue but rallied back from it, posted a nice finish. It's unfortunate. It sucks. It really does. But again, this is the format, and sometimes you're just a victim. I personally think that the hole is too much because, one, there's a big points gap there, and then two, you're going to have to rely on not only one person in the playoffs right now to come out, to come back to you. You also are going to have to top Truex as well. And so, I agree. I mean, Bristol, we've seen things happen, and it's absolutely a chaotic race, but that's just a lot. And to me, I look at this as a situation of you better go out there. If you're going to point your way in, you better finish darn well in the first 2 stages, because that's your opportunity to cut that deficit, almost completely gone, depending on where everyone else finishes. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be really, really tough. And Bristol has not been their best track in some time.
Yeah, look, I when I say that, I'm assuming you're going to have to run probably top 5 most of the night. You're going to have a really, really solid night. You can't it's not going to be a Truex situation where I'm saying, hey, go run 13th and let somebody else fall out. I mean, you're going to have to go perform pretty well, but I don't think he's in a must-win situation. However, when I look at the 2 guys below them,
oh yeah,
I mean, they're done.
they're
done. Because they
Stenhouse
and McDowell, they could not. The one thing they could not have afforded to do was go into Bristol with big points deficits.
Nope.
Because even though Stenhouse, he's had moments where he's run well at Bristol in the past, and had decent runs, but they're most likely not going to win the race. So, and they're mostly not likely not going to finish top 3. So when you're saying, oh, he could go have a good run at Bristol, you're like, okay, yeah, he could finish between 5th and 10th maybe. And, if they had 2 clean races going into Bristol, you say, hey, I'll go take him to finish 7th and advance. But now Stenhouse is 22 back. Michael McDowell's 40 back. I'm sorry. I just don't see a pathway at all where they can. I don't see them winning the race. And I also don't see them having any sort of chance to point their way in at all. I mean, obviously McDowell can't, but even Stenhouse, I just don't think they're going to go there and run competitively enough for the entire night. I just think that it's very disappointing for them, obviously, because both those teams sort of have the same theme, right? Like, you might not think we're going to make it out of round 1, but just watch. Like, we have the capability to do it. And I believed him. And I think I had Stenhouse in round 2. I don't think I had McDowell in round 2. But I thought they could absolutely do it. Like, there's a pathway to do it. But now it's 2 bad races. It's just it's unfortunate, but their playoffs are going to end how most people would have thought. Like, those are the 2 ones that are probably going to be out first, and they are.
Yeah, I mean, their pathway to the next round was twofold. One, first and foremost, do not make mistakes. Don't have issues on pit road. Don't get the car on the wall. Finish races. And then secondly, we are going to capitalize on everyone else having issues. At Darlington, when we know there's trouble is everywhere and it's going to sideline some guys, we're going to pick them off. And when we go to Kansas, same thing. And that way, when we go to Bristol, we're in a position where we don't got to win the race. We just got to put ourselves in position, execute. And neither of those teams have really executed. 4017 particular, today is a good example of that. Stenhouse gets in the wall. Day goes sideways. McDowell, that whole incident with Austin Cindric was, he's lucky that he did. That could have been worse. Like, what are you doing at that moment? I know you're frustrated. I get it. Like, just that's the kind of stuff you just got to get. You got to stay out of, because that can go wrong in a hurry. And it's just that the game plan they had to follow they haven't followed it. And now they're in a spot where they're going to need, I mean, I don't want to say they can't win, because I mean, we've seen weird things happen, and Ricky's finished second there. And I think Michael's had a couple good runs there as well, but it just, it really feels like the light switch is going to turn off for these guys.
So we know Larson and Reddick are in, they've advanced. Hamlin's plus 49.
He's in.
Like, okay. Byron plus 41.
He's in.
You feel like lock
41 points, solid. A lot of points, man. Yeah. You can go there and get stage points too. Like, I'd have to look at the clinch scenarios. But
what if Byron goes and gets taken out on lap 1? Is that still enough to? Somebody's gonna have to gain 41 points on him.
Yeah. So Byron, all Byron has to do is finish, according to Bob, and Bob, we never doubt Bob, right? Bob has got it that all Byron has to do is finish 15th with no stage points. So
I actually feel like, even with plus 41, even if you get taken out early, to ask, Truex to beat you by that, that's a lot. That's a lot of points.
It is. And that's also taking into account too, there's probably going to be someone else below you in the standings that is probably going to have an issue too. So they're going to get bumped out probably before you do, if you look at it. So I think I would feel very, very, very confident about them.
Okay. So then the next group is Keselowski plus 33, Blaney plus 25, Kyle Busch plus 24. Any level of concern for any of those 3? You feel pretty good about their chances?
I don't. I mean, anything. Blaney, Keselowski 33, Blaney 25, Busch 20. I think anything probably 18 on back would give me pause. I think Buescher plus 13 is really where you get concerned, because
I'm not there yet. I'm just saying, of those 3, the Keselowski, Blaney, Busch, 24 plus 24 and up.
I think I think you're feeling pretty good about yourself, and you feel like if you can just go there and stay out of trouble and finish, top 15, you're going to be in a decent spot.
Yeah. I do think if you're Kyle Busch, though.
Yes, I know you're going to say it. I think I'm going to say the same thing.
Well, Kyle Busch feels like pianos are falling out of the sky on him right now.
I mean, this is, I mean, some of it's bad luck, sure, but like, you gotta have. When is the last time this team had a clean race from when they unload the car at the track to when that car gets on the hauler to leave the track? When have they had a race weekend where nothing happens to them? Whether it's bad luck on their own doing or self execution, like, it's been I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him after the race and was just like, "How do you, what are you feeling going into Bristol? You feel pretty good about it?" Because I mean, he's pretty good at Bristol.
Yeah.
But he was like, he started to say, yeah, and he kind of paused and he was like, well, I mean, it's he feels like everything's sort of, they're getting all these bad breaks, as you mentioned. He was in the media center saying yesterday, was like, hey, as long as we don't do what we did at Darlington, where we put ourselves in a terrible position to start these weekends. And then he goes out and pops a tire in practice, and You
And
know,
again,
they
not
got to
his
start
fault.
back
Like,
in. No,
I mean, it's just, but that's part of it. And this team is, I don't know if you call it snake bit or whatever, but it's just, they've got speed. That's the thing. Like, they had a
Yeah.
really fast car, Darlington. They had a fast car today.
I
But
mean,
it doesn't.
you give me Kyle Busch and a 24-point lead going into Bristol. I feel pretty good about it. But I also
Absolutely.
recognize that luck can be a factor. Okay,
Yeah.
so the group you started to talk about, that's where I want to focus on for a second here. So again, you've got Chastain plus 18, Buescher plus 13, Bell plus 13, Logano plus 12, Harvick plus 7. Out of those drivers, who are you most concerned about? Who should be the most worried going into Bristol?
Well, I mean, Bell is the one that jumps out to me because that team, like I counted 3 issues on pit road today.
Is that right?
That's that by my count. Now don't hold me to that. I believe it was 3. They had an issue on pit road that slowed them up. And that team, and they were my pick, but that team, we talk about executing, that team can't put together a race either. Like they've got speed, they're qualifying well, and they just keep it's like a degree of difficulty with them. And so Bell's a really, Bristol's a really good track for Bell. Adam Stevens is very good there as well. But how can this team inspire confidence right now the way they're running? Like they just can't stay out of their own way. And if you have an issue on pit road at Bristol, because there are green flag pit stops, people tend to forget that, but there often are green flag pit stops or whatever. And you have a bad pit stop at Bristol and you get back in that mess, then what? Like that to me, and I'll tell you why I have less confidence in Bell than Logano and Harvick, who are below them. Both the Logano and Harvick do a great job of just figuring it out. Logano today is a perfect example. He's going to finish 15th or whatever it was. He leaves with a 5th place finish because that team figures it out. Harvick today at Darlington, same thing. Like they just, whatever they have, they figure it out. And yes, they had the miscue at pit road, and Harvick did. I get that. But that team is just grinders. And both of these teams they are so good at capitalizing on other people's mistakes. And you put them at Bristol, they're smart enough and to put themselves in positions to do that. I don't have that same confidence, unfortunately, with Bell, despite his pedigree, despite what he did last year and winning at the Roval in Martinsville. I just am not impressed right now with how this team is going.
So I feel okay about Chastain because I feel like they're going to do what they need to do to advance.
Yeah.
They have an 18-point cushion to play with. So as long as you don't get in too bad of trouble, you should be okay. It starts to get dicey around the Buescher, Bell, Logano part. Buescher won there last year, so I'm not thinking that he's going to go there, stink up the show. They just won at Richmond. Not that Richmond's the same as Bristol, but they had speed. So I would think they'd be okay. Although, can you imagine? It would just be such a NASCAR type story where Buescher comes into the playoffs with all this momentum. He's riding high.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Keselowski advances. Buescher's out.
Yeah.
Like it would just be like, what?
But that's what happened to Stewart-Haas Racing a year ago. Kevin Harvick came in the playoffs, all those momentum, back-to-back wins. Like, hey, this team is back, and they had not their fault of their own, but at least not at Darlington. They're out in round 1. By the way, their teammate, who was off all year, Chase Briscoe, ends up making to the round of 8 and is like this Cinderella story. Like that, it's not unprecedented.
Yeah, and I think Bell's skill level at Bristol, I feel like is pretty solid. Even going back to Xfinity and things like that, elite. I feel like he's really good there. So, and I feel like Harvick and Childers, for the reason you said, they're going to figure out. They're going to just do what they have to. They're going to get their way through. They're going to grind it through. 100%. So that leaves Logano as my biggest area of concern. Logano, again, if he doesn't take that 2-tire call at the end, he's only +2 instead of +12. I just don't feel like they're running that great. I'm not seeing what I want to see out of that team, the defending champions. And I'm not saying they're going to miss it, but I'm saying we have to pick one driver to be concerned about out of that group that's already in. If you're Martin Truex Jr., can you go out point Logano by 12 points? I think you can. I think it's possible. I'm not saying that Logano's going to have a bad night, but I think it's possible. If you're looking at one of those guys, I think it could be doable.
Yeah,
So
I agree with you on Logano. I mean, they haven't had the speed. The one thing I think is working in their advantage is that this is Bristol, a short track. This isn't a 1.5-mile racetrack. If we were going to Kansas in this race or Texas, I agree with you 100% of like, whoa, man, that 22 team is going to be, they're going to be worked out. But Bristol negates some of the disadvantages that Penske has had this year.
sure.
And it's quote unquote a driver racetrack. So I agree with you. That team is not performing, but they have figured it out. I do think Bristol, they are lucky in that they're going to Bristol and not somewhere else.
Well, in that case, then if you're saying it's down to Bell and Truex, then that's an inter-team battle.
Sure.
Separated by 13 points. And I don't know that Truex is going to be able to outpoint Bell, his own teammate, in similar equipment. So then you really are, if you're Truex, you really are banking on somebody. Yeah.
You're going to need help. Like I firmly believe that. You can go out there and you don't control your destiny. You can go out there and get stage points and finish second, and it doesn't matter because Bell could be finishing ahead of you at every one of those stages in the race, and it still wouldn't matter. And so, yeah, and that's the danger where you put yourself in.
And yet, the way this format is, if Truex advances, he's still one of the favorites to make the Final Four.
100%.
Like immediately again. So it's like we're talking about, oh, he could be out. And if he squeaks his way in, oh, Truex. It's like it's just a very strange circumstance in a lot of ways, but that's this playoff format. Sort of the beauty and the curse at the same time, I guess. What else you want to talk about from this race? You want to get into the Elliott Larson?
Yeah, I would love to talk about this.
Yeah. Okay.
I got questions, and I've got a lot of I'm confused.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, to me, first of all, I think Elliott had a great run. It was nice to see him have some speed again, and it felt like they made a step forward competitively.
Yeah, he's running well lately.
So, to me, it just looked like, okay, well, it's in a pretty dicey moment coming off pit road. There's getting squeezed. Larson kind of moves up, makes accidental contact with his teammate. And then Chase, sort of, I guess, loses cool for a moment.
It's a recurring theme, by the way.
Flash of red and doors his teammate. Afterward, Bob asked Chase about it on pit road. I was standing there, and Chase is just sort of like Bob. I think Bob said, maybe it's on Twitter by now for everybody to see it, but Bob said, well, what message were you trying to send to Larson there? And Chase he's like, message? No, there's no message. No. Like totally just like, what are you talking about? No. But then we talked to Larson, and Larson's like, yeah, here's what happened. And he lays out the whole thing. And, once he sees the replay, he'll probably understand. But then I hadn't seen the video of Chase going over to Larson's car and sticking his head in the window, and Larson trying to defend himself, argue what happened. So, I mean, clearly there was some unhappiness there. I mean, you don't need Chase to confirm that to see he swerved at his teammate, but it seems like those two just keep sort of having this recurring, every once in a while it pops up where you're like, especially the stuff that happened between them last year a couple times, like they're fine until they're not, and then it just sort of bubbles up, mostly on Chase's end, it feels like.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I think it's very fair. I think it was incredibly stupid. I think it was incredibly stupid. And I get it. You're frustrated in that situation. But we've already seen a moment this year where Elliott's frustration got the better of him, and it cost him a race. And you have to take a second there to realize if it was not a non-teammate, okay, sure. That's your teammate. Okay. Don't do that. Second of all, your teammate is racing for a championship. Now he's already locked in, and what he does today, finishes, doesn't matter maybe in the grand scheme, but he's racing for a win and everything that brings with it. What happens if he hurts Larson's car? What happens if Larson cuts a tire or something like that? Like, what are you doing? Like, why? What are you hoping to accomplish here? I get you're frustrated, and I think it is one of those things when he looks back at the video, you're like, oh, you know what? I get why Larson moved over in heat of the moment, but again, in a year where you've already been criticized for your decision making because of what happened at Charlotte, like you've got to take a step back. It was a dumb decision. You don't do that to your teammate in this scenario, in these kind of settings in a playoff race. It is a no-fly zone.
Well, I'll tell you another little wrinkle there. Did you hear? I don't know if Reddick said this on TV, but he said afterward in the media center that he felt like that little moment allowed him to. I think he ended up coming off pit road in between them.
Yep.
And that allowed him to pass one of the cars, get a better position on the restart, get one row up, and then that was the key. So he's in
the domino effect.
He said these races come down to those little moments like that. But he said he'd have to go back and look at a replay, but he thought that was what slowed them down enough for a minute to let him come by. And yikes. Now obviously, you don't really know how it's going to play out and all that, but still, I mean,
he's lucky. Like if he knocks out Larson, if Larson has a tire, something happens to Larson's car.
Yeah, if he cuts Larson's tire down or
a tire there, anything. I mean, just
that's a bad look. Yeah.
I mean, you dent his car. I mean, anything. It just you impact the performance and by anyway. Like I don't see what you're hoping to accomplish. There's nothing that's good that's going to come from that at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're seeing red. It's similar to the Suarez thing with Bowman last week, where but he was mad at Bowman, and we get Bowman was blocking, but Suarez also, sort of took himself out in that moment, and probably didn't need to, and could have waited again. But
and I get that, but again, like you got parked this year because you intentionally wrecked somebody. Like you would just think that would flash in your mind for a second of, hey, the last time I tried to do something like this, it just, it's just.
Well, he didn't hit him that hard, but
no, he didn't hit him that hard, but it's not worth it. Like, what are you hoping to gain? Like,
I get it. Yeah.
And I get it. I get you're frustrated. I get you had a bad year, but you're also, by the way, let's not lose sight of this. You're also racing for a championship. Like the 9 team has circled their wagons around the fact that they're still racing for the owner's championship. Like they are very adamant about that. Great. You're racing for you've got a great run going today. What happens if you swerve at him and something you cut a tire? Then what? And that late in the race, you're the 9 team is in a good position to move forward because they've had and all of a sudden you're not. Like, look at the bigger picture. And it's a teammate. That's what makes it all the worse.
Yeah. No, I can't argue with anything. I mean, you're making good points. It's not a great look.
No. And the season's full of not good looks for him.
Yeah. He's still in it though. I mean,
he is. They got lucky.
Points, but
yeah, it's good. And again, I think great to talk to Chase next week. I will bet that he goes back and looks at this and he'll like see it from the wider view, like, oh, I get it, but and that's fine, but it's hard, I'd like to go back and hear the audio of it, and I would wonder if his spotter, and I don't know this, but like if someone on the radio was just saying, hey, listen, quickly telling you, like they almost should have told him, like, hey, just this is what happened.
It all happened so fast, though.
Exactly. I get it, but it's just tough.
Yeah. What else from this race jumped out at you? I mean, you still love Kansas? Is Kansas still the best mile and a half?
Kansas. I like Kansas. I love this race. I think it's fun. No, I mean, I think you really hit on it at the beginning of the show. And, we all kind of have certain expectations for this in terms of the chaos factor and everything. And was it the typical quote unquote Kansas race? No, but it was still good. It was still entertaining. Yeah. It was not the mile and a half race we have typically seen. I shouldn't say that. It's not the race we saw earlier at Kansas this year, which is arguably one of the best of the year, or what we saw at 600 at Charlotte. It was a little bit more spread out and everything. It wasn't that side-by-side stuff, but it was still good. It was still very solid. It kind of felt like an old school NASCAR race in that kind of respect. I was fine with it. It was, to use the term, it was perfectly acceptable, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about that during the race, actually. I mean, that's what it was. I mean, I thought it was a good race. It wasn't like the best race of the year, but I was entertained enough and, interested enough in it to see what was happening. I think especially before Denny really started pulling away, where you had those moments where you're like, oh, wait a minute, now is Harvick going to get up here? Is Keselowski going to get up here? There was some things where you were like, oh, okay, wow, this has some interesting little action going on. So, yeah, I mean, it was good. It was fine. I still think Kansas is, this is one of the places where I'm happy they're here twice a year. Kyle Busch had a pretty good point, I think, yesterday in the media bullpen session, where he said, any track that doesn't sell out should only have one race per year. And I think that's kind of a good standard. Like, if you do sell out, you can have both races. Kansas, obviously not a sellout, but I still think like this is a pretty good place. Like, I would not be in a hurry to leave Kansas. And again, a few years ago, you wouldn't have said that at all. It would have been like, why does Kansas have two races?
No.
So
I mean, there's a lot of other tracks that have two races. I would yank one of their races away before I'd come calling for Kansas.
Yeah. So
the only thing I had on my list, and I don't know if you were going to hop there or not, was the Xfinity Series wrapped up its regular season. Obviously, Parker Kligerman gets in, Riley Herbst gets out. Any thoughts on that and kind of looking at the playoffs really quick?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of unfortunate just the way that happened, where Herbst ended up making contact with Kligerman. I mean, it wasn't Kligerman's fault by any means. Like, he missed a shift or popped out of gear, I think, on a restart, and Herbst gets into the back of him, but that's pretty much the end of the day. But I think just the fact that Parker made it with Big Machine, last October at Martinsville, they had that press conference, and it was like, wow, this is really cool for Parker Kligerman, because this is a guy who was pretty much out of it. I mean, that's why he was doing so much pit reporting for NBC. Like, I mean, he was out of a ride. Like, he was getting in some stuff part-time, or he would do trucks, or, and you're like, man, this is the guy where if he could just get a chance, we talk about those guys. What could they do if they really had a chance in decent equipment? And you know what? He went out and he made the playoffs, and he beat some pretty big teams in doing it. Some big name organizations with more funding than he has, and he got himself into the playoffs. So that's a cool little story for sure. I think it's I don't know how far they can go, but the longer they are sort of like the underdog. I mean, they're not like the classic, small team by any means, but they're also not a powerhouse multi-car organization. So I think it's a neat story, don't you?
I agree. And I think if anybody wants to know about this, you wrote a story in 2019 about Parker, and kind of him transitioning to broadcasting and how the opportunities weren't there for him. And that was a phenomenal read. So anybody interested in this story about kind of Parker and where he was at, I recommend to go read that, because that was good stuff.
Well, and the truck race had their first elimination round. Ben Rhodes ends up making it. Matt DiBenedetto and Matt Crafton out. But one thing that was really interesting for trucks this week was NASCAR did another one of their show and tell things. And it was pretty smart. I mean, they took
Joe Shear Jr., man. We talk about Chad Knaus all the time, but Joe Shear Jr.'s rap sheet, and I'm not criticizing this as a compliment, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Well, people like Landon Castle and Kenny Wallace on Twitter made the point that this is a fairly old school, short track trick that people try to sort of bleed the tires.
Joe's a short track guy.
But, I've never seen it. I've never seen it up close, shown side by side, things like that, where they say, look, here's the cap. It's a cap, and it sort of looks like, in layman's terms, the type of cap that you would put on your bicycle tire, right? Except this one had a little tiny metal rod in the middle of it. And so you put the cap on, you screw it on, right? And so it seals it, but that rod is poking just enough to let some air out of the tires as the pressure gets put on it, but not enough to make it go flat, because it is sealed. So it's not going to totally come out, but just enough.
Just enough.
Yep. And the funny thing is, NASCAR in this case caught it because the official heard air coming out of the tire when they were rolling through inspection. They heard
I know, it's the funniest thing. The only thing the team did wrong is that everybody just started coughing as they're going through inspection. Okay, guys, everybody, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
like
that wouldn't have been obvious. But I liked Landon's tweet about it, where he was sort of like, what are you doing with this now? Like, to get away with this now is too big of a risk. You probably could have gotten away with it at the championship round more than anything. You know, so
but it was worth it though, because
why? They were already in.
they weren't in. They got the. I mean,
No, they were already in.
oh, you mean I'm talking? Yeah.
At Milwaukee when they
Yeah,
got caught, they had
you're
already
right. You're
won.
talking about my opinion on this
Well, they had it
is
before.
they would, and I know that's bad to say, but you go back and you look at what they did at IRP, how dominant they were. You go back a week before that, even at Richmond, and how dominant they were. Like, it doesn't,
Sure.
you know, and that, yeah, but you're right. I mean, you probably scale it back at Milwaukee and you say, listen, we're already locked in the next round. If we're gonna, you know, let's not do this. But I guess the thinking there is ride it into, let's ride this as long as we can, and they haven't got it so far. So what
Yeah.
the hell, right? And like, hey, we're gonna get some bonus points out of this. That's my thinking, but. And I'm not trying to make accusations, because they did pass Tech at IRP. They did pass Tech at Richmond, but man, that performance in those two races was outworldly for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems logical that they would have had this before, but you know, I guess maybe you do get a little greedy and say, hey, well, it's another short track coming up, and you know, let's get 5 more points here. Let's get another win. We're rolling. Everybody's just gonna think, we really nailed it on short tracks right now.
We're hitting on it, yeah.
Hitting the setup.
Yeah, look at us, man. Yeah, ties. Yeah, we made the championship 4 last year. We know how to peak and all these things. Heck yeah. Joe Shear Jr., man. Respect.
He'll be back for the championship race, assuming his driver's still in the playoffs at that point.
He's probably concocting some other scheme.
No.
But again, I say that with respect.
Yeah, I mean, it's really enjoyable for me to see what people are trying to do.
I think it's
and
great.
I love the transparency this year.
I love the show. I love it because, one, I think it's great to show everybody like this is what's going on. I think it makes NASCAR look really smart too. Like, hey, we've got inspectors who are like, you think you're going to outsmart us, but we're getting this, you know, by like, the thread of the window nets earlier this year was so different, and they caught that, and then they contact the manufacturer, and the manufacturer's like, no, and like, that to me is like, this is like CSI stuff, man. This is like, and I think it makes them look good. Like, we listen, you and I, me especially, like, we have poked fun at them and for all sorts of things, but they're on top of this. They really are, and you know, and I think it shows. And I love the show and tell, and I love to see like the ingenuity of like how are people trying to, in this day and age when everything is, you know, supposed to be, you know, out the window, and crew chiefs don't have a box to play in, man. They're still finding a box to play in.
Well, and again, like too, we talked about this earlier in the season, but it reinforces the credibility of the sanctioning body, right? Because how many times where, you know, a team will get penalized and you go, well, I mean, that driver was outspoken, or he ripped NASCAR, or this crew chief said this, and then we never see it. And you're like, wow. And then you hear behind the scene, you know, the team's going, they're just getting back at us or whatever.
We saw that in the
right?
spring, man.
And you go, well, man, what is really going on here? We don't get to see it ourselves, so you don't really know. And you know, that's how conspiracy theories start. But when they're like, here's what we took off their car. Yeah. Here's what the real one looks like. Can you see the difference? Yeah, and this is what it did. And you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty hard to argue with that one.
Yep.
So I hope that they're able to keep this up, and you know, I also think it hopefully shames people into you know, trying to not do this stuff. But of course, we all know that.
I was gonna say, man, there's 75 years of history that says that ain't gonna be the case.
Yeah. But you know, as an observer, again, like, you want it to be decided straight up, and not just who can cheat the best. But yet, that's part of this. That's part of the sport for sure. Yeah. But
part of the charm.
It is fun. It is fun to see that stuff. So, yeah. Well, anything else that from this one that you want to touch on? I feel like we're missing something, but I can't. No, I mean, I don't have my usual setup because I'm in this lounge, and normally,
so fancy. You know, my name's Jeff, and they gave me a private lounge with a lock and key. And...
I'm just saying, normally at home, I've got my scoring monitor, I've got the points, I've got all this stuff. I don't have any info here, so I'm just looking at you.
Oh my God, the burden you carry. How do you do this? How do you get through this?
I can't see Twitter right now, so I don't know if you've put
Thoughts
out
and prayers, man. Thoughts
another
and prayers.
another cheating tweet. Boy, people at the tweet up today, they were like, Jordan really cheated.
Okay.
He really cheated last week. They were really on my side for that. So shout out to everybody.
Not cheating. Not cheating.
They said before you make your guess this week, you need to put a rule in the rule book that says you can't do that.
You can't do that. You can't add. This isn't you're not the. You can't. It's like a one-man band. Like, what are you, Bill France reincarnated? Like, this is like you're iron fisting this. Like, oh, this is it. I'm gonna add a rule this week because I said so. No, it ain't working like that, man.
Well, so you're what are you going to keep tweeting out? Are you going to keep testing the temperature and phoning a friend?
No. I've got a plan. The plan was never to do that for this week.
Oh, because you lost. You end up losing last week, so now you're just going to Price is Right me. That's your plan.
Bingo.
Okay, that's totally fair. So here's my dilemma, folks. I need to try to anticipate what he's going to do, and then make sure that my guess is going to be on the correct side of it. So, this race was good. I don't think it was great. I think it was good. And for that reason, I'm not even going to say my thinking anymore because I don't want to sway you.
Oh my goodness. No, the listeners, you're shorting our listeners quality content, Jeff. Because don't do that. Don't short our listeners. Give them what they demand and give them your reason and explanation. That's not fair. That's very selfish.
I think 79.5.
Oof. All right.
So you're going to go higher or lower?
79.5, huh? Was it an 80 race? I've been really off late. Like I've not had good feel for things. Is this an 80? Is this an 80 race? Does this feel like an 80? I'm gonna say 70. Friends? I'm gonna say that is the strategy that you go to other times. That is not this week, okay? There's a rhyme and reason to how this is gonna go. 78% for this guy.
So I said 79.5 and you're saying 78?
Yep.
Why? Why'd you do that?
Was this a race at 80? It was fine. It was good. But it wasn't like a race that people are going to like, oh, wow. Now I'm wondering, though. Because I didn't think Darlington was great. I didn't think Darlington was... What did Darlington come at? Like 84?
83 or something, I think.
Yeah, and I didn't see that, though, either. So I just... I just sometimes you get on heaters where you feel like you got your thumb on the pulse. I do not have that right now.
That's why you got to cheat.
I didn't cheat. I got creative. There's no rule in the rule book, and you are being slanderous, and I will not tolerate it.
Mm-hmm. We already went through this last week.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, I was in Target this week scouting out, so we are tied 1-1 now.
Yep.
And I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. Still, people could not believe also that you wouldn't wear my clothes after I put them through the laundry. That's crazy. No. That is really excessive.
No, I'm not wearing I'm not wearing clothes other people wore. There's no chance. I am very picky about that. Have
you ever borrowed your dad's sweatshirt or something when you're visiting your parents?
No, I bring my own sweatshirts.
Okay.
I don't wear my dad's clothes anyway. You see my dad's closet? If I wanted to dress like a dad, I dress like my dad.
All right.
My dad's like the cliche, cargo shorts, phone on the hip, New Balance tennis
Maybe I'll
shoes.
Maybe I'll just have your dad supply me with some outfits for you to wear for Daytona 500. That'd be great.
You could wear something out of my dad's closet, I kid you not, and no one would bat an eye. And they'd be like, oh, that's just a typical Jeff outfit.
That's good. That's good. I forgot my hat.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, I had to put sunblock in my hair today.
Ooh.
Because I realized when I got to the track, I forgot my hat. So I was trying to rub it in. I just got a haircut. I'm pretty bald. And, it reminded me of sort of a similar striking line that you just said to me, where the other day I'd given my girls a bath. My wife was at work and I was brushing their hair. Because if I don't brush their hair after I give them a bath, my wife she's like, their hair's all ratty and
you get the knots. You gotta comb their hair right away.
So I was like, you girls have beautiful hair. Like both of you just have absolutely beautiful hair. You're so pretty. And Liliana said, well, you don't because you don't have any.
I love her so much.
I was like,
her so
yeah.
much.
So you saying that about the closet just now sounded like, yeah.
What's her favorite candy? I gotta send her some candy.
Please don't. Oh my God, please don't. She has enough.
No, she doesn't. I gotta send her some.
All right.
Oh, I'll see you at Bristol, so I'm gonna bring you some candy for her to give her.
Bristol, it's gonna be exciting. We're not only gonna podcast together, but we're gonna carpool all the way from Charlotte and then back and forth from the track from our hotel. Oh my God, it's gonna be a lot of Jordan car time. I'm gonna be
It's mean.
I mean, it's just a lot.
I'm looking forward to it. I always tell you, I enjoy our conversations.
You enjoy like the first hour, and then, I mean, first of all, it's 3.5 hours just the track the first day. Oh, this is going to be.
It's mean. Why do you like to hurt me? Why
No, just we're going to be sick of each other. That's all.
I've never.
We argue virtually.
I've only gotten. I wouldn't say sick of you. I've only gotten frustrated with you like once in my life, where I just wanted to like turn at you and be like, just stop. Other than that, and that was at Talladega 2 years ago. You know the story. I told you the story. And and other than that, I've never gotten to a point I'm like, okay, I'm done. I can't. I enjoy spending time. I enjoy our conversations. I pick your brain on things. We talk about what's going on. I enjoy that quality time. You're the big brother I never had, and then for you to sit there and just say these things, it's like, damn. Okay, wow, okay.
All right, we'll see if you still feel that way after this weekend. Then I'll take it back.
No, I feel like this all the time. I drove you around for North Wilkesboro. I was your only thing I was missing my little chauffeur's hat. And the entire time I had no beef. I enjoyed it. Instead, I get mocked and ridiculed.
All right.
So,
well,
I hope you feel good about yourself. Fully.
I mean, do I ever? Anyway, well, it'll be fun. It'll be fun to be back with you, Jordan. And will you come to the Tweet Up next week?
Yeah, I should be there.
Bristol night race is usually one of the biggest ones. So
I'll be there. I should be there. I see no issue with that.
Okay.
Our buddy Kaz will be there too.
NASCAR Kansas will be there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you'll probably go do something and not invite me like usual?
No, man. Bristol, there's no opportunities to do anything because everything's going on at night.
Yeah, and you can't do your best work on a Saturday night when the race is actually on a Saturday night. So
I know it's tough. It's really, really tough.
Yeah. Well, we will do our best to give you a live version of the Teardown very, very late next Saturday night from the basement of the Bristol Motor Speedway Media Center, where there was a bug in the room last year, giant bug that had to be destroyed. But anyway, they don't want to hear any more of this rambling, Jordan. People are like, how much longer? we please end this podcast. That's what they're saying. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time on the Teardown. See you, everybody.
See you.